So getting into the specifics of what we've been talking about, a lot of times people will say plastic, and they say it in a group setting, and not all plastics are equal. And we've talked about the difference between what goes into the recycle bins, the mixed plastics, and some of the other uses. Our science lesson, chemistry lesson with the UCLA gentleman was actually really pretty interesting. And so we talk about the use of plastic in the United States, and 7% of the plastic that we're talking about is PET. So when we talk about the big glump of plastic, and a lot of times, I'm not sure why, but we all look to the bottle, the plastic bottle. It is actually a pretty small percentage of the plastic that is being produced. More importantly, plastic bottles, beverage bottles, am I not close enough? Okay, I thought you were like holding that up. Are only 1% of the solid waste stream. So when we're talking about diversion and what we can do, specifically when we're talking about even some of the proposals that are being considered at the council level and in the mayor's office, when we're talking about taking away a commodity that actually has a recycle, is 100% recyclable, has a domestic market, and is actually where you get more profit as opposed to some of the other plastics, it seems counterintuitive to go after the ones that are the ones that are doing good. So that's a good conversation for us to have. And it's a small percentage of your waste stream where you're not going to be able to divert a lot of it. And then, of course, we talk about the other plastic packaging. Kate, you want to add anything on that? Okay, all right. So this has a lot of information. I know that's a rule against slides that you're not supposed to do that, but it was a lot of information we were talking about. These are national numbers. So earlier the gentleman talked about 75% of what goes in the blue bin here in the city of Los Angeles, 75% of it is the mixed paper. This is pretty consistent at a national level of those numbers. So you're talking about tonnage or you're talking about percentage generated. 40% is mixed paper. Glass containers are about 20%. Americans love their wine and beer bottles, right? And those kind of things. So that's another percentage of it as well. And then cardboard. And then you see PET bottles are down at 6.6%. And so when you're talking about what we're generating in the recycle, the PET bottle is actually still pretty small, but we still did not let our companies be off the hook on that. They have been talking about sustainability for several years. There's been a change in balancing what goes out. So this is all liquid beverage containers. So not just our sodas or waters. It includes everything. It has, teas, fruit juices, and everything. And you'll see over the last 20 years the trend for glass has remained pretty consistent, 1.5% down to like 1.2, and it vacillates a little bit. The place where it has had a lot of change, of course, is plastic and cans. And there was a comment about, I don't know anyone who likes their soda out of a can, a plastic bottle over a can. The problem is that the consumer does want the plastic bottle because it's resealable. And so we have done some investment to do the aluminum can because there's a smaller container. So you can drink it in one container. You don't have to worry about resealing it. We've done that not only for the sustainability issue, but, of course, for the health issue. If you're talking about full-calorie beverages, we want the smaller container so you have the smaller calories. And so there has been this trend here over the last 20 years. Innovation and what we've been trying to do with our own PET bottles. Our marketers hate the sustainability group. Kate has not had any friends in that space, and so we have made sure that they're 100% recyclable. So not only, I usually travel with my refillable bottle, but I went from home to D.C., back to LA, home is Sacramento for me. So I had this, and I've refilled this about 4 times since I've been traveling over the last couple of days. And so it's refillable, but we have made sure the label on it can come off pretty easily. So not all plastic does that. We make sure that the tops that are also 100% recyclable. And so those are the trends that we talk about, having it to be the level and the responsibility of the producer to put that out, that it's a product that can be recycled, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we've stepped up to it as the beverage industry. We are only a small percentage of the plastic flow. And that is not, I think that is a good conversation for us to begin to have about, we've done it several times. We're willing to collaborate and share our learnings and experiences with any other single-use products or plastics that are going down that road now. But what are some of our learnings? And trying to get some of those positive outcomes for sustainability. Want to add anything to that?
What I would add to that I think is a good guide to use is there is a group called the Association of Plastics Recyclers, APR. They have guidelines that determine what is recyclable and what is not. And those guidelines were really important to help align the beverage industry, to help align the other manufacturing industries so that there would definitely be clarity on what was okay and what wasn't. And we needed it so that we could, from the environmental side, speak with the marketing side, speak with the technology side, and come up with some standards and metrics that everyone could follow. And if they're not guidelines like that, then it doesn't work. It just won't work. And I think for a MRF operator, which is I started on the ground, I understand those challenges of everything that's coming through the system and you're left with it on your floor and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. Those guidelines help. So to be able to claim that it's recyclable, it really does need to follow APR guidelines. And so for instance, the mixing of a PLA lid with a PET container would be incredibly difficult, and I don't know that would ever get past those guidelines, because then, as you all said, at a MRF, you would be left with two different commodities that may even look alike, even to your optical sorters, which would be a disaster. There was a point in time when some of the beverage companies were really pitched to use PLA as their package as opposed to PET, and it was something that everyone really did consider and look at. But in the long term view was the recycling industry was here to stay. The recycling industry was something to invest in, and giving them a high-value container that will help pull through the system based on its value was mission critical. So I think all of those design guidelines are very important. There are marketing folks that want to make these packages different colors. They want to put lights on them. They want to put all kinds of things on them. And the environment team has made a compelling argument to the management teams. And so we are staying within those guidelines and not going to a place that may sell more product because the package looks good, but staying at a package that is fully recyclable is really, really important to us.
Thank you, Kate, for saying that. That's a really good point, because one other piece of that APR guidelines is they communicate a lot with the reclaimers. They have that input, so that when we're determining what is recyclable and coming up with those standards, it's not just because they've come up with them on their own. They have actually, on the ground, had the communications with those folks, looked at the technology to pull that through to be able to do it. Just by way of example, we're talking about our constant struggle with marketers and what they want to do. One of the big examples is Sprite bottles, right? They tend to have been green. You will start to see, some of you may have already start to see them in clear bottles, and they're doing green labeling around them to kind of appease the marketers, but getting to the place where, because if that PET bottle then goes through the whole recycling process, it can end up being a water bottle next time. But if it's green, you're not going to be able to, convert that back into a water bottle. So it just makes for less disruptors, as we would call them, and to bring that in. And so that's been one of the pushes and give and takes that we've been having with our own marketing companies as well. Yeah. Anything else on that?
Keep
okay.
Going. All righty. Everyone wants to hit the freeway.
It's like, I'm stuck.
It's not moving?
Thank you. So we've been talking a lot about source reduction, and our terminology in the industry has been lightweighting, and some of you, much to your chagrin, may have been frustrated about, you go to open your water bottle and some of the water squeezes out just because of the plastic being so thin. But we have been thinking about this for, over, a dozen years, right, about trying to make sure that we are conscious about the amount of plastic that we are putting into the marketplace. And so the goal really has been to have a thinner plastic bottle so that we're using less virgin. Now a move, of course, is to do recycled content, where not only will you would have something that's thinner, it's easier to use recycled content in steel products as opposed to carbonated products. Zach probably can tell you some of the reasons why that are way above my head, but some of the carbonated drinks have some more challenges when we're talking about having higher recycled content. But we can't get them as thin, right, but we can with the still water. So there are some of the places that we have the flexibility to do it in that space.
Good, that's good. Yep.
So I talked about us doing the 100% 100% recycled bottles. One of the things we talked about, industry leading the way and trying to, make sure that we are the example. And this is not any place different. In October, the American Beverage Association announced initiative Every Bottle Back. We are usually competing with a bunch of different folks for our own bottles to get them back. We talked about the asphalt in the street just a little earlier. And so Kate really helped our association and got our companies on board to embark on the Every Bottle Back, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that. Let's switch the screen again. There we go.
So the challenge for us was really designing the packages first to make sure they're recyclable, but with the content goals that the companies themselves are setting. So this is beyond public policy. This was something that each company themselves was setting as a goal. We had to take a look to see what the potential was as far as feedstock goes to see if we can meet those goals, because we couldn't just pull a number out of the air and say, sure, we'll do that, and then not find the material through the system. And so the way that we determined we needed to play a role was not just say our bottles are recyclable, but how can we invest in the infrastructure to make sure that it's healthy enough to bring the material back through so that we can put it back into bottles. So there's a combination of different pieces of Every Bottle Back. Part of it will be advertising because that's what those companies do. But the one I think that's most important here is the $100 million down as an investment in infrastructure. So it's a combination of the Recycling Partnership and the Closed Loop Fund that will be coming to communities to help tune up the recycling system, both in the communication space. So I heard every single panel talked about communication. So if you haven't seen the Recycling Partnerships work, they're fantastic. They partner with cities with grant money to help you put out a communication plan that will engage your community to recycle all the materials. Of course, we want PET and aluminum back, but we want the whole system to be healthy. So the Recycling Partnership is doing that. One of their main focuses in the first couple years will be multifamily units. Being a local Californian, I know there's a few multifamily units here in LA. We should really talk about what that might look like for Los Angeles, because they have amazing ways, creative ways to really pull material through the system and communicate with your citizens on what's recyclable and what's not. Closed Loop is going to be doing investments. What they have done over the 5 years of their life is both invest in technology, so it's the robotics and those types of innovations, but they're also investing in MRFs so that MRFs can be as efficient as they can. Some of the data that we collected when we were trying to come up with these recycling goals was, the materials collected at a curbside, it goes to a MRF, what's going into the waste stream from the MRF, what's going into the recycling system from the MRF. And because of some of the outdated technology at MRFs, we were losing materials that had value. And so what can we do for MRFs so that there's no material loss of high-value materials. So that'll be the closed-loop role. We're also working here in California with the reclaiming industry. So I've been to the 6 reclaimers that are all very, very close to you that take PET back. They make all kinds of things. We would prefer they make bottles, but they make all kinds of thermoforms, egg cartons, all kinds of things. And they want to grow. They are very supportive of recycled content type mandates because they think that's going to help their businesses. We're interested in them to push more material through their systems. And so what kinds of equipment do they need? What can we help them with to grow so that more PET will come through the system? There's going to be an aspect of it where we're measuring our footprint of our PET bottles. That is being done with World Wildlife Federation. WWF is our partner in that. So we want as a goal to minimize the amount of virgin plastic that we're using. And so WWF is working with us on how we do those measurements and how to set those goals so that we can then report out externally. And then finally, there's going to be a label on containers that are recyclable. So that is a big step for us. The label will tie into our Every Bottle Back communication strategy. So the whole idea is how can we get our containers back through the systems that are in place, what systems need improvement, what kind of communication needs to take place, what do MRFs need, and what do reclaimers need. So that the Every Bottle Back's a 10-year project that's being funded by the industry as a partnership with communities and with industry. So it's I think, a big step for us to show we're serious about really improving the system and making sure that it works. Part of what our board has asked us to do is make sure that we're looking for innovative ideas, new ideas. What kinds of things can we try? So I've heard a lot of that today, and it's a conversation we should continue to have because we're looking for those kinds of unique things that may be groundbreaking that we can try.
One other thing I wanted to add to what Kate was saying about our relationships with some of the reclaimers and everything, when we are talking about getting a bottle back as opposed to it going to a thermoform, a lot of the reclaimers will tell you, we do food grade. We only do food grade. Well, there are different processes in there, usually as an extra step because FDA requirements are about what food are contained. So if it's liquid going back in your body, there are some certifications that are required by those reclaimers. But more importantly, the process of them going through getting it in flakes and then getting it to a sheet, and then it needs to be pelletized generally to go back into a bottle. Many of those reclaimers do not have a pelletization process. They usually send it out to someone else. So when we're talking about making sure they're able and equipped to be able to get a bottle back to us, those are some of the equipment and infrastructure challenges that we're having to getting that source material back to have recycled content for our bottles that we'd like to use.
Okay, that's good.
I'm pointing at that, but I went too fast. Yeah. No, I didn't. Okay. So we've been talking about the China sword and the disruption to the marketplace and that it has created some uncertainty. But it's curious and it's really important to look at the numbers when you talk about like what the general commodity prices. And of course, the commodities are changing every day, and our MERS probably know this more than us. But when we looked at the comparison from 2017 to 2019, and you look at the cost where we were, getting $65 for the mixed paper, and now we're paying $2 for it. But when you look down the line, look at the loss for PET. It has sustained the least amount of loss of all the commodities that are on there. And so when we're talking about what kind of things we're pulling out of the system to make your budget work, Enrique, to make sure that those products are able to help balance it out until we figure out the technology for the other mixed plastics, the 3 through 7s, and some of the other ones. A lot of times the answer is go from plastic bottles to go to an aluminum can. Some of the factors that we looked at not only are what the consumer might want, they might want to put the top back on the bottle if it's a smaller container, but also the carbon footprint generally on making aluminum is higher than it is for plastic. So looking at all those factors about, are we doing something that getting rid of plastic that may in turn, if we're going to go to aluminum, are we doing more damage to our carbon footprint or things like that we may have intended, may not have intended. And it's important to consider all those factors. And so it is not just about what the consumer wants, but we're looking at the source, the availability of it, the cost ultimately to the consumer. We talked about even for the initiative, the 11 cents getting passed on. You know, at some point, the manufacturer is also investing in making sure that product, at least in the beverage industry, is 100% recyclable. That costs money as well. And so not only are you talking about what you do with the end user, which we do with the bottle bill, but you're also talking about investing in the initial technology as well. Just a little bit about this. The demand for PET, it is huge that it's not going bottle to bottle. It's mostly going to fiber. Almost half of it is going to fiber use instead of, food and beverage bottle is only 21% of it. And so the information that, for us trying to get it back is no small feat for us to try to do that. And let's see, we just a little bit about some of the state legislation. We're very involved in AB 792 that was unfortunately vetoed by the governor. It had numbers where it would have had a 10% recycled content by 2021, a 25% by 2025, and then a 50% by 2030. The industry believed that those numbers were where we could get to. We're still supportive of those numbers. We're still working with Mr. Ting and Ms. Irwin to try to come up with a minimum recycled content bill. I know that they are looking to introduce something by Friday, by the deadline tomorrow for the bill introduction. So we'll continue to work on that effort. We removed our opposition from 1080 to we call it 1080/54. So it's what you guys have been referring to as SB 54, single-use packaging. We removed our opposition last fall. We do believe that the conversations are important to continue to have. We do think that there's some challenges in the current version of the bill. It was amended back in September. There's some amendments being considered right now, and we're trying to continue to be part of that. And then lastly, of course, there's a pretty substantial debate about whether we try to improve our 30-plus-year-old bottle bill system or whether we look to go to an EPR system. And with 54 and 1080 on the horizon right now, if it's successful, do we have everything under one umbrella? Like, that's shifting more to an EPR type system. I know a lot of people refer to Oregon as being an EPR system. It is not. It is not. So we can get in kind of the weeds on that at another time. But those are all issues that we're continuing to work on that can change what our outcomes could be. And then just last thing, because there is one other motion that's considered about tethered caps, and we talked about whether we thought in the state legislature whether that was a good idea. To put a tethered cap, which is like this bottle that I'm been drinking out of, it requires more plastic, more virgin plastic to go back into the system, into the environment. So we had, voluntarily on our own, embarked on a campaign, an education campaign statewide, and actually other states have picked it up too. We are usually put on our recycle bins across the state. We're working with Keep California Beautiful and doing education programs to try to get that information out so that people can understand that the cap is also recyclable as well, and we want that back as well.